Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Sales. If you're looking for actionable insights and real-world tools to turbocharge your sales starting tomorrow, well, you're in the right place. Your host, Kay Miller, earned the affectionate nickname Muffler Mama when she sold more automotive mufflers than anyone else in the world. In this podcast, Kay will talk to another superstar woman in sales as they reveal uncopyable strategies you can use to rack up more leads, snag dream clients, and take your sales numbers through the roof. Stay tuned and get ready to make more sales and how about this? More money.
Today, I have the pleasure of chatting with the delightful Kate Strachnyi. Kate is a force, and her passion is data. We'll be talking more about that. In 2020, Kate founded a media company called DATAcated. She's a thought leader, consultant, author, LinkedIn learning instructor. The list goes on. And she has 169,000 LinkedIn followers. Kate, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Kay. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
It's so great to talk with you again. And the first time that I met you, you had discovered Steve's book, Uncopyable, which I have right here for anybody who's actually watching. And you found his book, which is really cool. Of course, that's a couple of years ago when you weren't quite as busy. And you started this business in March of 2020, right?
Yes, I did. And I remember reading Steve's book, and I remember reaching out to Steve on LinkedIn just to say, hey, I loved your book. Thanks. And then he responded, and I'm like, oh my God, the author responded. How cool. And then we ended up chatting a bit. I remember meeting you, and we did a couple of shows together. So that was fun.
Yeah, it was great fun. And I actually have your latest book, which is ColorWise. So if anyone doesn't have that or haven't read that, you need to get it. It's interesting.
Wait. Where's your latest book? Because I
Oh,
haven't.
my
I've got mine in the closet.
Oh,
Right?
thank you for bringing that up. Uncopyable Sales Secrets.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. I did take a lot of the uncopyable concepts like the moose, which I know you love, the branding, which you've really gotten into big time, and how to apply that to sales. And so even though you're not a typical salesperson, you do sell things as part of your business. So I'd like to start out and have you explain a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes, I'm happy to do so. So hello, everyone. I'm Kate Strachnyi. I'm the founder of DATAcated. It wasn't always that way. I used to have a real job, and now I love my job. So DATAcated is essentially a play on words of me being dedicated to data, and it has my name in there, sort of, Kate. And it's essentially a media company that focuses on helping data, AI, and analytics companies reach an audience. So brand awareness, content amplification, just think data influencer on social media. That's pretty much what I do, is working with companies like IBM, Intel, SAP, Alteryx, ThoughtSpot. Probably over 90 companies since I started in March of 2020. And it's been quite a journey. I feel extremely lucky to have worked with these organizations. And that's sort of part A of what I do. It takes up most of my time and energy. In addition to that, I do have a community called the DATAcated Circle that has courses on data visualization and dashboarding. I've also written books, as you just showed. My latest with O'Reilly was ColorWise. And I sell merch. I do a bunch of other things. Like I go to conferences. I'm a Data Venture now, which is this new initiative where it's a bunch of us that go to data conferences together and we do fun stuff. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Boy, and there's a lot to it. And like I said, you have just exploded since 2020. Do you happen to remember how many LinkedIn followers you had back then?
Probably about 50 or 60,000, because I was already growing my personal brand since about 2017. I started being more active on LinkedIn and YouTube. And it was sort of already starting to grow. And then once I went full time, the growth really picked up.
Right. And I just looked at 168,000 followers. It's October of 23. And so we'll see how much further it grows. I mean, I'm just in awe of you. And one thing I remember from our first conversation is that you truly are passionate about data. And that is so different than my world because, as a salesperson, I love the talking and the, schmoozing and presenting the solutions and interaction and all that stuff. Now, I know you have a lot of that, but you really are passionate about data. And so that is something that I think is really important when you're selling. Um, now, I remember recently seeing that you showed a picture of a journal. And I don't know when you wrote that, but you had your goals spelled out.
Mhm.
And it sounds like you've achieved most of them. So, talk about your journey to success, and especially in a way that women and all people can use your experience to help them. And it's goal setting, I assume, is a big part of that.
It really is. I think I began setting goals back in my first job, which was waitressing when I was 13 years old.
How
Yeah.
13?
Yes, I was 13, my
Oh
first
my
job.
gosh. Child labor laws.
Yeah, no, they didn't pay me though, so it was okay. It
Oh,
was tips
okay.
only, so I made but I
That's all
did
right.
work. I worked crazy hours. So I would go to school, do my homework, then go to work, and then go out. I was one of those teenagers that actually went out at night with no curfew. I grew up pretty fast. So, anyways, I was working and I used to take notes a lot just for myself. And I remember setting goals of what I wanted to achieve by the time I would be 18 years old, 25 years old. Just I was always planning ahead and some silly goals like I'd love to save up $3,000. Oh my God. Like to me, I mean, grew up in Tajikistan. We came here as refugees to the country. So for me, $3,000 at that age was just like winning the lottery. But
And
I
how
remember
old, by the way, how old were you when you moved to the US?
I was almost 9, so I was
9.
8 years old. Yes.
And I mean, you have quite a story then. I think you said you hadn't even gone to school at that
I had
point.
not gotten to school until 4th grade in New York. That was my first time in a school period. So I didn't know what raising your hand meant. I was that. Like I didn't know math, I didn't know English, I barely knew Russian because I didn't go to school there either. So I knew the basics.
Wow. Well,
And now I have kids like we were talking about that earlier, and then they're in 2nd and 4th grade now. And I'm like, I don't even care about your homework. I don't care if you do your homework because I'm like, I didn't even go to school at this age. So I don't make a big deal. They're great in school. They're like way ahead of where they should be, which is another reason I'm not worried. But I tried to look at their work for 4th grade and I'm like, how did I do this stuff without knowing the language? A lot of it requires you to know English. So
I know. So you were obviously driven and goal oriented and very smart. And not a helicopter parent like a lot of people are. And I have to put myself in that category. So I think that's good in a way for you to kind of leave your kids alone, especially if they're thriving. What would you say then, besides that, really has contributed to your success? I'm also curious if you intentionally chose LinkedIn as your way to grow your business or if that kind of morphed.
yeah, I think the reason first I'll address the goal setting is I read and I still continue to read quite a lot on the topic of setting goals, personal growth. I love those books. And that was part of why I was drawn to Steve's uncopyable book. I think it was part of my goal to read 60 books that year, and that was one of the books that I ended up reading. It was whatever I was interested in, I would read.
Hmm.
So that sort of covers the goal setting and I think motivations as well. So I think having that sort of background, continuing to push forward and trying to do everything I can to succeed, combined with this goal setting. For me, once I set a goal, it sort of has to be met. So when you referred to that journal earlier, um, it's really nice. I think all my journals, unless I actually lost some, I don't remember. But when I refer back to it and look at what I had planned, let's say 6 years ago, 5 years ago, as my dream life, and then read through it and sort of go like, oh wow, like that actually happened. This actually happened. Okay, I didn't want that to happen, so I'm glad it didn't. And sort of going down the list, it becomes sort of unreal to be able to read through that and see what you've manifested and work towards, obviously. So.
Right. Well, and that is a huge recommendation to set goals, but also be a lifelong learner, reading books and studying and keeping up, your game in the knowledge area. So then what about the LinkedIn part? Was that
Yes.
intentional?
No, it was not. So what happened was I was switching my career. So I will go through it quickly. But when I graduated with my finance degree in 2009, I ended up getting a sales job, actually, business development, where I actually had to sell risk management training to banks. I sold so well that I actually ended up landing a job at the bank I was pitching, where the chief risk officer was like, "Hey, we need a risk analyst." And like, okay, well, I actually want to work for a bank. I don't want to sell. So great. I ended up working there, started a risk blog, which was picked up by Deloitte, who said like, wow, okay, you must really love risk management. Let's bring you in. So fast forward to when I'm switching careers from risk management to data analytics. As I was learning, I was trying to understand what a data scientist does, what a data analyst do. And I did interviews, just like what you and I are doing right now. And I started publishing on YouTube. So I actually started my journey on YouTube with a very quick podcast, 15-minute max, called Humans of Data Science, where I picked people of various backgrounds, industries, regions, and just had a quick conversation like, hey, how did you start? Pros and cons, recommendations. And that sort of took off where people really found value. And I remember studying for a certification. This is where LinkedIn comes in. And I posted on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'm studying for this Tableau certification, which is a data analytics software. And somebody commented and they're like, wow, good luck, or here's a resource. And I was hooked. I'm like, oh my God, people are nice. They're so helpful. They're cheering for me. So then came back and said, hey, I passed. And then it just continued snowballing. And this was probably 2017, if not earlier, that I started venturing into LinkedIn. And now LinkedIn is sort of my number one platform with YouTube close behind.
So did you ever imagine where you'd be right now? Was that part of your goals, or was that not exactly what you pictured, or how did that work?
It's interesting because it brings me back to about 3.5, maybe 4 years ago. I was talking to my coach mentor. We were assigned those at the consulting firm. And she was asking me if I wanted to be partner in the firm. And I said, no, I'm like, no, I don't really want to work for someone. And I was very transparent about my personal goals of wanting to be on my own. I've always wanted to start a company. I started mini companies as a kid, which is for another conversation, where I always wanted to sell stuff, actually. And she's like, so what do you want to do? So I told her I would love to be paid to go to events and hang out with data people. And she's like, well, who's going to pay you to do that? Well, look at me
Yes.
now. People are actually doing it. So it's quite funny how whatever you want to happen sometimes will actually happen if you work at it. So I did have a vague idea of what I wanted to do. It does take effort to continue to change course until you get there, because shiny objects do exist and opportunities pop up and come your way where you're like, oh, wow, I didn't ask for it, but should I go there now? And sort of keeping that focus on what you actually want, but still being willing to take those turns and explore other opportunities as well.
Right. Use that word pivot that we've heard so much, right? Since the pandemic.
Yes.
So you did have an idea, but it doesn't look exactly like what you pictured. But like you said, you've been able to adjust according to what's happened. So you were in a strictly sales position. So I'm going to pick your brain on that. You've got the goals, you've been driven. You're, of course, very into the personal brand, which you've done a fabulous job doing on LinkedIn, and showing your authenticity. You're very personable. But what would you say to women or men? I'll just keep saying that because we talked a little bit about that issue and we will touch on it again. But what advice would you give to someone who wants to be successful in sales and maybe beyond?
So there's lots of advice I can go with. And I think I'll start with it. It depends on what we're selling, right? So I'll talk about things from my perspective of selling dedicated media sponsorships,
Okay.
because I think that's an example we can think through together. So I would start by saying understanding your clients and what they need, right? So I guess that doesn't really matter what you're selling. It's always going to be the same case where you could be selling chips Are you selling them to teenagers who are, just want the best flavor, or are you selling them to maybe health conscious adults who want to lose weight, right? Thinking through your actual audience, what they need.
What do
And
we call them? What do we call those people? Your moose.
yes, you see that moose? Whoever's on the camera watching, there's a gorgeous moose behind Kate.
That's right. That's right.
You guys should
So
get a pet moose. I mean, I highly
we
recommend.
should get a pet moose. I don't know. I saw a video of a moose walking through a yard, and they don't look very pet-like or very petable.
You can virtually adopt the moose today. Okay,
Oh,
let's start a
that
campaign.
sounds like a good idea. Adopt a moose.
Adopt.
So knowing your customer and also knowing your product, being passionate about it. I mean, I sold a product that was kind of hard to be passionate about the product, which is mufflers. However, what floated my boat was helping businesses and helping customers. So you can, I think, get excited about any product or service. And like I said, you're kind of oddly interested to me in data, but you love it, and that
Thank you.
shows. So besides getting to know your customer, then what do you do next to get them?
So I'll address one concern that this is sort of I guess, leaning on the women issue, because
Okay.
a lot of women tend to tell me that they have discomfort actually selling, especially when it comes to selling their own service, their own product, and especially if that price is on maybe the higher end, right? So let's say a $20,000 product, right? A lot of
Right.
people
That's on
would,
the higher end. Yes.
right, it's not 25-cent chips anymore. So if you're selling something for $20,000 and this is a service that you'll deliver or product that you're going to provide, chances are you might face some imposter syndrome of like, oh my God, why would they buy from me? Who am I to deliver this service? Am I really that valuable? And it took me some time. And it actually, I read a book. I can send you a link after because I don't remember the actual name. But it talks about mindset and money addressed to women, and how we have a lot of people have sort of some issues with the limiting mindset where they think they can't earn more than X amount. And as you grow in your career, that amount is likely to gradually increase. For some people, it does not increase. And it's all driven by mindset. It is actually crazy. I remember one client they pitched double my rate because I didn't want to travel to a certain location. I hope you're not listening. But I really, because I have kids, I am really selective about my travel. So I really did not want to go. And I'm like, okay, I will double my rate. And if a rate I was already comfortable with, if they say yes, I will go. Okay. They immediately said, sure, that's great.
Wow. So
So I'm
that,
like,
yeah.
okay, this is now my new rate because now I've charged for it. They've gotten value. They were very pleased. They've come back to do more work together. And now it sort of just resets my mindset. Okay, I'm now worth more. And I think that's just something that takes some people time. But having those conversations and having folks you can talk to in your field is very helpful. Because anytime I say, hey, I charge $1,000 for something, and then somebody says, oh, I charge $5. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could charge $3 now, because now it's like your benchmark keeps changing. And it could go the other way as well. Like, oh, I'm not selling any because I'm charging 20. And they're like, well, most of my clients are paying 10. So you have to keep shifting your benchmark, staying true to your value. But sometimes you might be on the other side of the imposter syndrome where you just think you're amazing and you're not making sales because you're pricing too high. So there's definitely a balance, and you can keep sort of trying to find your sweet spot.
Well, I would love to get the link of that book, and then I will put that in the show notes because, like you said, mindset is huge. And a lot of the women I talk to are just amazing, like you. They do talk about mindset, but it's hard to describe exactly how you get and keep that mindset. I think your background, you had to be a fighter, and just being the person you are has really helped. But and it sounds like reading books and constantly feeding your brain positives is really important.
And surrounding yourself with awesome people as well. So not only
Exactly.
reading the books, but also applying what you learn in the books. I know a lot of folks who just read the book and then put it on their shelf. I usually read with my phone close by because then I take notes as I read, and then I try to apply things directly to what I'm working on almost that same day. And it's been much more helpful than just reading. Every chapter, you sort of get a new idea. So actually taking action when you're reading is
Uh,
important.
And taking notes is really a good idea because I'm guilty of that too. Sometimes you read a book and you only retain a little bit of that. So
And I-
to take notes, and you've done a great job of building a community. And I know you've got just a core group that you've been with for a long time. Was that intentional? How did you go about creating that group?
I think it created itself because a lot of us don't have a full-time job and we are solopreneurs, right? It's just us in the business. And what happens is it gets lonely and we don't really have many people to talk to about what we're working on. So when you find someone who's in a very similar boat as you, maybe drifting along in a slightly different direction, um, you just sort of build these friendships. And now we're even building a business together with some of those friends called the Data Ventures that I was talking about earlier. But it's so helpful to compare notes, compare costs, compare prices, compare, what tools are you using? Oh, I'm using this, or which microphone are you using, even down to those details. And it helps that they're awesome people and they're just fun to talk to as well.
I know that you seem to really have a good camaraderie.
Yeah.
And you are in a male dominated industry. You said you have some issues with being singled out as a woman, as maybe not being capable. But we talked about, in my opinion, it can also be an advantage because you are unique. And that is just one of the things about you that makes you unique. Do you want to talk about that, your opinion about that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the point we were talking about earlier is I love promoting women in anything, women in sales, women in data, but I try not to call it women in sales because I think it makes it seem like women should not be in sales, right? Which it goes against what most people are trying to promote. So I personally have this mission where I do want to see more women in data or AI on stage as speakers, as authors, and it is a male dominated space. And I think slowly it is shifting. What I try to do is I try to do it secretly. Like if I'm filling a speaker agenda for a conference that has 16 speakers, I will try to make at least 8 or 9 of them female. But I wouldn't say, oh, look, we have women in data. I'll just say we're having a conference and look, these are our speakers. And
So
did they
you
just
are,
happen to
yeah,
be
you're
women?
promoting
Yeah.
diversity. And I read a little something that you wrote that you said you write so much stuff that you couldn't exactly remember, but that women do have some skills that make them maybe even more naturals in data, at least in aspects of it. So I think it's great that you're promoting women, and that's what I am working to do as well. Women in sales are very underrepresented and shouldn't be like that. So
Yes, I agree.
as far as just watching you on LinkedIn, talking to you before, I mean, you post a lot, you create a lot of value that you share. What's your strategy for creating value up front and improving your worth?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I didn't start out planning to be like a data influencer or even a content creator. I just continued to create content and sort of one thing led to another. So I would say if you're starting out and you want to build a personal brand, you want to get more involved in content creation, it's similar to sales, right? Think about your audience and what value they need, what problems they have, and then create content that you would like to consume, right? So don't create content for the sake of creating content. Think of do you wish you read maybe, 5 years ago that would have helped you along your journey on a specific topic that you're focused on. So if we're talking about sales tactics as an example, was there something that you learned recently that you want to share that will help your audience? And defining that audience, like I said, is one of the most important first steps. But don't bucket yourself into like, oh, I can only talk about sales. No, I would say focus 80, 90% of, your personal brand and what you want to be known for. But don't forget that a personal brand has the word personal in it. So don't be afraid to bring something personal in it, like you and Steve and the color orange and the moose, right? That and the whistle, I still have that moose whistle that she's dog whistle, but
Oh,
moose
it
whistle
does.
that
It's really a moose whistle, yeah.
And they still have the umbrella. I actually took it to London a few weeks ago, that orange
Oh,
umbrella.
good. Awesome.
Yeah, so bringing in some personal touch that people can remember to make you uncopyable. We've come full circle.
Exactly. And you talk about being a runner, and then you just posted something about picking up the guitar again
Oh, yeah, it's
recently.
right there.
Oh, good. You've
Yeah.
got it. So for people that are watching. And that's kind of funny because I have played the piano off and on. Actually, when our daughter Kelly was 5, she took piano lessons, and I thought, oh, I'll take them with her. And, as an adult, you learn faster. So I played off and on, but just recently I've picked it up again, and it,
Okay.
it feels really good. It's really good. But you use those as part of your brand. And so we feel like we know you to some extent, at least what you want us to know about you.
But you know what happens is I'll share two very quick stories of what happened when I posted about my running and my guitar. So for the running, I actually was able to get sponsored by TCS to get paid to run the New York City Marathon in 2021.
Wow.
Just because they're like, hey, you love running and you love data. Why don't you talk about data and running? And all my dreams came true that day, because that
No
was
kidding.
best gig ever. I'm like, I get to get paid to run. Like this, I'm not a fast runner by any means. So that was crazy. And then more recently with the guitar, so I posted a picture that said, 10 years ago, I played guitar, and then, I was expecting my first kid. So I sort of took a break for 10 years. Now, the CEO of one of my data company clients reached out, and he's like, hey, you should come perform at this Tech Tackles Cancer event in November. And so now I'm practicing a song, which I'm not allowed to say until the actual concert. But it's a very, very fast song that requires me to practice every single day just so I can learn it. So that's sort of why now I'm playing the guitar every single day until November 7th.
Do you have nylon strings or steel strings?
Feel, and my fingers.
Steel? Oh my gosh. I played the guitar off and on too. We had a musical family. Steel strings are so hard to get used to. You must have some pretty good calluses now.
Yes, and I've had to cut my nails, and I've been practicing, and it's just also very fast, and there's a power chord involved, and I'm also going to be playing on an electric guitar for the actual performance. So I
Wow.
not played electric before.
So
Listen,
you're pushing your boundaries even now. I think that's really good. Getting out of
whatever
your
happens,
comfort
happens.
zone.
Listen, it's
And
all good.
and as far as being in sales, that's another huge thing. Getting out of your comfort zone. How many times have you had to do that?
Oh my God, always. I think one of the biggest times was when I was hosting my very first virtual conference, and we had over 7,100 people registered. It was my first conference that I
Gosh.
was
Your
running.
first conference and you had that many people? Wow.
It was live, and I had sponsors. I had 16 speakers, at least half of which were female.
Yay.
And I remember it was virtual, right? So I'm standing in front of my laptop. I have my DATAcated stickers on my wall behind me. And I was so nervous because you could see the number of live viewers just tick, 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 like breaking 1,000. And I'm like, okay. And I could have just closed my laptop and said, screw this. But then I actually took a step back and asked myself, even if I mess up, right, how many people have the guts to try? And I'm like, okay. And then I always think about, hey, we're all gonna die anyway, so might as well have fun in life.
I like
Yeah.
that. That's true. And you know what? I'm a little further down the the journey than you are, but it's true. After you're gone, who's going to even remember a lot of this stuff in the grand scheme of things? Um, you are now a LinkedIn superstar. You give classes. You're
Oh,
LinkedIn
LinkedIn instructor, yes.
instructor. Thank
LinkedIn
you.
learning instructor. Yeah. I just had my third course come out 3 days ago.
So, I mean, that's really great. And that's got to promote your brand as well, your visibility. But what's your feeling about that, creating content?
I think it's still sort of a 90-10 percentage, where 90% of my efforts are spent on creating and responding. That I sort of bucket that as one, and then 10% of consuming either my friends, my clients' content. And I think it's still important to consume at least some, because it really does give you lots of ideas. Even if you're consuming content from a very different industry, or even a different platform, you can get inspired and say, "Oh, I can transfer that over." And I think, Steve, one of I think, did Steve write another book about sort of stealing from other
Yes,
industries?
stealing genius, and it's that
Stealing genius.
exact concept
Yes.
where you look outside your industry or even to nature and to experiences that you have that have nothing to do with your world, and that really helps you think creatively. We say, don't think outside the box, build your own box. So
Yes.
that's one of his wise sayings that I kind of messed up there, but I can't believe the time has just flown, and I would love to get any of your final thoughts on, your success, especially like I said, as it addresses the sales side.
Yeah, I think believe in yourself wherever you are out there and whatever goals you want to accomplish for yourself. Uh, I wouldn't say stop watching others. I highly encourage watching others and seeing what they do to get inspiration, as long as you're cheering for them and not sort of saying, "Hey, when is it my turn?" Be inspired and then take action. So once you've got your goals down, write them down. It's much easier once you've written them down. It's fun to compare years later as well, how far you've come. Take action every single day towards that goal, no matter how small, even if it's just connecting with the right people on LinkedIn, maybe reaching out to those connections, having a meeting, having a call. Every one of those little drops in a bucket takes you that much closer to your goal. So just do it, as Nike would say.
That's right. Just do it. Well, Kate, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Kay.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Sales, your source for secrets you can use to make more sales. Check the show notes for links and contact information. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please spread the word by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. You can always learn more by going to uncopyablesales.com/podcast. Until next time, go out and supercharge your sales like a true uncopyable rock star.